Welcome back to another Invisible Man reading for 31 days of reading of the Invisible Man. And this is Chapter 6. Chapter 6, The Furniture That Went Mad. Now it happened that in the early hours of Whit Monday, before Millie was hunted out for the day, Mr. Hall and Mrs. Hall both rose and went noiselessly down into the cellar. Their business there was of a private nature, and had something to do with the specific gravity of their beer. They had hardly entered the cellar when Mrs. Hall found she had forgotten to bring down a bottle of sarsaparilla from their joint room, as she was the expert and principal operator in this affair. Hall very properly went upstairs for it. On the landing, he was surprised to see that the stranger's door was ajar. He went on into his room and found the little bottle as he had been directed. But returning with the bottle, he noticed that the bolts of the front door had been shut back, and the door was in fact simply on the latch. And with a flush of inspiration, he connected this with the stranger's room upstairs, and the suggestions of Mr. Teddy Henferry. He distinctively remembers holding the candle while Mrs. Hall shot those bolts overnight. As at the sight he stopped, gaping. Then, with the bottle still in his hand, went upstairs again. He rapped at the stranger's door. There was no answer. He rapped again, then pushed the door wide open and entered. It was as he expected. The bed, the room also, was empty, and what was strange, even to his heavy intelligence, on the bedroom chair and along the rail of the bed were scattered the garments, scattered the garments, the only garments so far as he knew, and the bandages of their guest. His big slouch hat even was cocked jauntily over the bedpost. As Hall stood there, he heard his wife's voice coming out of the depths of the cellar. Then, with the rapid telescoping of the syllables and incognitive cocking up of the final words to a high note, by which the West Sussex village is wont to indicate a brisk impatience. Gerard, Gerge, you gart, what a wand! At that he turned and hurried down to her. Jenny, he said over the rail of the cellar steps, "'Tas the truth was Henferry says. He's not in his room. He ain't, and the front door's unbolted." Mrs. Henferry did not understand, and as soon as she did, she resolved to see the empty room for herself. Hall, still holding the bottle, went first. "If he ain't there," he said, his clothes are, and what's he doing without his clothes then? 'Tas a most curious bandness. As they came up the cellar, it was afterwards fancied they heard the front door open and shut. But seeing it closed, and nothing there, neither said a word to the other about it at the same time. Mrs. Hall passed her husband in the passage and ran on first upstairs. Someone sneezed on the staircase. Hall followed 6 steps behind. Thought that he heard her sneezing. She, going on first, was under the impression that Hall was sneezing. She flung open the door and stood regarding the room. Of all the curious, she asked, she heard a sniff close behind her head, as it seemed, but turning was surprised to see Hall a dozen feet off the topmost stairs. But in another moment he was beside her. She bent forward and put her hand on the pillow, and then under the clothes. Cold, she said. He's been up this hour or more. As she did so, a most extraordinary thing happened. The bedclothes gathered themselves together, leapt up suddenly into a sort of peak, and then jumped headlong over the bottom rail. It was exactly as if a hand had clutched them in the center and flung them aside. Immediately after, the stranger's hat hopped off the bedpost, describing a whirling flight in the air through the better part of a circle, and then dashed straight at Mrs. Hall's face. Then a swiftly came the sponge from the washstand, and then the chair, flinging the stranger's coat and trousers carelessly aside, and laughing dryly in a voice singular like the stranger's, tuned itself up with its four legs. Mrs. Hall seemed to take aim at her for a moment, and charged at her. She screamed and turned, and then the chair legs came gently but firmly against her back and impelled her and Hall out of the room. The door slammed violently and was locked. The chair and bed seemed to be executing a dance of triumph for a moment, and then abruptly everything was still. Mrs. Hall was left almost in a fainting condition, and Mr. Hall's arms on the landing. It was the greatest difficulty that Mr. Hall and Milly, who had been roused by her scream of alarm, succeeded in getting her downstairs, and applying the restoratives customary in these cases. "'Tis spirits," said Mrs. Hall. "I know 'tis spirits. I've read in papers of tables and chairs leaping and dancing." "Take a drop more, Jenny," said Hall. "'Twill steady ye." "Lock him out," said Miss Hall. "Don't let him come in again. I half guessed I might ha' known with them goggles and bandaged head, and never going and never going to church on Sunday, and all they bottles mourn it. It's right for anyone to have. He's put the spirits into the furniture, my good old furniture. 'Twas it 'Twas the very chair my poor dear mother used to sit when I was a little girl. To think it should rise up against me now." "Just a drop more, Jenny," said Hall. "Your is all upset." They sent Milly across the street through the golden 5 o'clock sunshine to rouse up Mr. Sandy Wages, the blacksmith. Mr. Hall compliments and complaints, and the furniture upstairs was behaving most extraordinary. Would Mr. Wages come around? He was a knowing man. Was Mr. Wages, and very resourceful. He took quite a grave view of the case. "I'm damned et theft and witchcraft," was the view of Mr. Sandy Wages. "You want horseshoes for such gentry as he came around greatly concerned. They wanted him to lead the way upstairs to the room, but he didn't seem to be in any hurry. He preferred to talk in the passage. Over the way, hucksters patients came out and began taking down the shutters of the tobacco window. He was called over to join the discussion. Mr. Huckster naturally followed in the course of a few minutes. The Anglo-Saxon genius for parliamentary government asserted itself there. There was a great deal of talk and no decisive action. "Let's have the facts first," insisted Mr. Sandy Wages. "Let's be sure we'd be acting perfectly right in bustin' that there door open. A door on bust is always open to bustin', but ye can't outbust a door once you've busted in." And suddenly and most wonderfully, the door of the room upstairs opened on its own accord, and as they looked up in amazement, they saw, descending the stairs, the muffled figure of the stranger, staring more blankly and more blackly and blankly than ever with those unreasonably large blue glass eyes of his. He came down stiffly and slowly, staring all the time. He walked across the passage, starting, then stopping. "Look there," he said. At their eyes followed the direction of his gloved finger and saw a bottle of sarsaparilla hard by the cellar door. Then he entered the parlor and suddenly, swiftly, viciously slammed the door in their faces. Not a word was spoken until the last echoes of a slam had died away. They stared at one another. "Well, if that don't lick everything," said Mr. Wager, and left the alternative unsaid. "I'd go in and asking about it," said Widges to Mr. Hall. I damned an explanation. It took some time to bring the landlady's husband up to that pitch. At last he rapped open the door and got as far as, "Excuse me." "Go to the devil," said the stranger in a tremendous voice, "and shut that door after you." So that brief interview terminated. And that's the end of chapter 6. Tune in tomorrow for chapter 8. So, friends, like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, follow us on social media, Funkyplaybrothers and Funkyplaybrothers, and please remember to help us by subscribing to our YouTube. Thank you for watching. Bye.